Welcome to another edition of Conversations of the Heart. As always, it is your boy T Till. We have a very, very special guest here in the building with us today, Dr. Carmen McNeil-Clinkscales. She has a Ph.D. in psychology, and she has expertise in mental illness and social behavior. She has been pouring out for over 20 years, teaching and training on a particular topic. And I'm going to name about a couple of them that she has, and hope that you guys follow with me here. So she teaches training courses. One of them is called Power to the Period, Rock with Your Menstrual Rhythm, and Dad's Puberty Playbook. She's also a graduate of the California Black Women's Health Project Advocacy Training Program. And she also was the former host of a very popular internet radio talk show called Spiritually Juicy. So, Dr. Carmen, welcome to the show. Thank you for doing the show. Appreciate you coming on the show. So, for the people who don't know who you are, just tell the people just a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, well, again, Terrence, thank you so much for having me. But as far as who I am, I'm a mom. I have a 16-year-old son. I'm a wife as well, amazing husband. But I think what's really, really important, particularly for this episode of the show, is that I'm very, very clear that I was put on the planet to empower girls and women. And I also know that men and boys are key to that empowerment. And so I focus on helping people have a better understanding of puberty, and particularly the menstrual cycle. Mm. And sometimes when people hear that, they're like, "Uh-oh, I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk about that." But what's really interesting in trying to shift the negative stigma about it is that when we lean in to understanding, the menstrual cycle for women can be an amazing guide for self-care. And when boys and men understand it, it can be a major way of connecting and building deeper relationships. It's amazing.
I love that. And yes, especially when it comes to this topic, one thing that struck me when I read Power to the Period, I was like, oh, okay, so she is catching eyes and making people uncomfortable. But it is a topic that it is needed, because I think understanding is key, like you said, to have an understanding of young girls, and for boys to have that understanding too, so that they can understand what women go through. And there won't be a lot of ignorance and things like that, so that they grow up and with that understanding, and then ultimately understanding they're wanting to have an understanding of their wives at some point, their girlfriends, whatever cases, as they're growing up, and so that they can have a good education, and hopefully they can actually learn more about women in other circumstances, about what they go through in life. And so I love what you're doing. And I know that like your vision is really to create a global community of girls and teens and women who are flowing forward. See, I love the wordplay that you have, and we're gonna get into this. So when it comes to period empowerment, because that's what you about period empowerment. So because you don't have any, you said you have a son, right? No daughters.
No daughters.
So what really made you get into this work? You have a PhD in psychology, right? So what really made you say, this is what I put on this earth to do? You don't have any daughters. Because normally it seems like that might be like, oh, I have daughters. Oh, light bulb, boom. This is what I'm doing, right? But no daughters. So what prompted you to say, I want to go down this road? I've been placed on this earth to do this work.
Yeah, so I don't have biological daughters, but I have lots of community daughters, right? These girls are me. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about helping, our community daughters, and, being in background in psychology and mental health. the mental health for our girls is an issue. It's an issue for everybody. But it's an issue, in terms of self-esteem, in terms of suicidal ideation, in terms of these girls comparing themselves to what's happening on social media and TikTok and not looking like them, but wanting to look like them and using that to evaluate who they are. This is deep. And so I've been teaching since 1998, teaching psychology since 1998. And probably about, I don't know, 5-10 years in, I started teaching the psychology of women. And right. And that's when I started really looking critically about how the menstrual cycle is couched, like how it's discussed, how it's advertised, how it's talked about, how it's not talked about. And all the stuff that I saw for the most part was negative, particularly in the United States. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This is a natural cycle that's required for the human species to continue. Why is there not more respect on it? Right. So this is my sort of pondering, my question, like we need this to continue. Right. And so I started looking at how, in some other cultures, when a girl experiences menarche, which is the technical term for her very first period, there's like a celebration. It's like a community celebration. She's dressed up in all this beautiful garb and there's a feast and it's like her coming out party, like, yes, and then there are some studies that say that, in some other countries that there's not as much negative stigma, around how it's discussed. When those women come to the US, they start experiencing more physical pain around their menstrual cycle. Yes, because how it's perceived impacts how we experience it. And this is so real. So this is how I got here. I started really realizing that girls were not receiving basic education about their bodies. And that lack of basic education was contributing to their lack of self-esteem, was contributing to their disempowerment. So, for example, in my Power to the Period workshop, which is for girls and their mom or their female caregiver, I do some basic anatomy education, right? And so bless these girls' little hearts, they thought that the hole they pee from is the hole that they bled from. And that's two different holes. It's two different openings, right? And so, a lot of times girls not knowing about their bodies is what contributes to shame about their bodies. So what I do is I teach them the power of their bodies. I teach them how, it's important to know all 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, which frankly, a lot of grown women don't know. And that when you know that, you can sync your lifestyle with your cycle. And that's how you start flowing forward in power and flowing forward in confidence. And so it's just really, really amazing work.
Wow. That's a lot. And so now it's one thing for women to understand their own bodies, right? Now that's a big task in of itself, obviously, right? Like, because you said some grown women don't even understand or don't know or don't have the knowledge, understanding, right? So now we're going to go from that to the other side. How do we get these young boys and men to understand more about their women, right? And so you have another, program, which is called Dads Puberty Playbook, right? So why was it so important for you now to bring this out with fathers, and also putting out this work to the public so now even young boys can learn and hear and understand more about women, right? And young girls and their counterparts and things like that. Why was that so important for you?
Yeah, a couple reasons. So first off, studies show that when girls are in adolescence, when they're becoming a young woman, right, they can actually feel their dads distancing themselves. I'm going to say more about that. I saw that question on your face.
Yeah. I want to hear more about that. Yes.
Right. So what's happening is that it's hard for dads to see daddy's little girl becoming a young woman. It's hard for them to see the little princess developing breasts and needing a bra and having, rounder hips, right? It's hard for dads to wrap their brains around that. They want to keep her 7, right?
I see that. Yeah. Protection.
Right. They want to keep her 7. Yeah. And so when she has her first period, usually dads are like completely shocked because it was not on their radar. When, for girls, puberty starts a year before they've started their period. So stuff is going on internally. So dads often feel like they've been hit by a Mack truck, right? They're unprepared. Wow. They don't know what to do. They're like, oh man, what? She got a bra. Wait a minute, what happened? And so what I learned is that a lot of times, because of dads just lack of knowledge and how to support their daughters, through puberty, there can be a gradual disconnect as, their daughter is in or going through adolescence. But the power comes from dads leaning in, not pulling back because they don't know what to do, but leaning in, because dads are critical for daughter self-esteem. Dads are critical for daughter self-esteem, for building that foundation, because, a lot of times when dads freak out, like, oh no, she started her period, they're freaking out because she could get pregnant now, right? So that's part of what the freak out is about. Like, absolutely. Oh no, what? And so dads will often go into protection mode, overprotection mode. Like, you can't go nowhere. You got to stay in the house. So I get it. But the problem is that the overprotection does not prepare their daughters. Protection is cool, but it got to include preparation. And when I say preparation, I'm talking about having conversations about what's out there in the world, having conversations about what to look for, what to expect, having conversations about, somebody probably going to ask you to have sex. They're going to proposition it. Someone's going to, offer you some drugs and alcohol. And when dads tell their stories about their own puberty and about their own growing up, right? And become a broken record and lean in. Like, daughters need to, when they out in the world, you want dad stories to be at the forefront of their mind. Because,
of course. Yeah.
Yes, because when they're in those precarious situations, you want them to make a decision that's going to be healthy for them, that's going to be healthy for their bodies, that's going to be healthy for their self-esteem, and not doing something to their detriment. And I'll tell you a really important personal story that really, really gets dad. So we going to go there, Brother Terrence.
I'm ready.
So I grew up as a daddy's girl. Okay. I have a younger brother. I definitely grew up as a daddy's girl. My dad was real tall, 6'4". We thought he was a tree. We used to climb up him, when we were kids. And he was very, very socially aware, socially conscious. He was an elected official, And he would always, tell us about the things that we got to look out for, what's going on around the world, what's going on here in the country as a Black woman. Okay, cool. But one of the things we never talked about was my development, right? My development during puberty, starting my period and, all of that stuff. We never had the conversation around relationships. And I'm talking romantic relationships. We never had that conversation. So, in 9th grade, I had my second crush. And after several propositions for sex, like I would decline. Finally, I said yes. And I describe it as succumbing. And this is 9th grade. And I did that because I wanted to keep him. I did that because I was afraid he would dump me and go to the next person, right? Now, right. Oh, so let it sink. Like, this is heavy. This is real, right? What if, leading into my adolescence, my puberty, or maybe, on the cusp of it, what if my dad had conversations with me about how this is coming, right? And how I would be loved by him regardless. And if, someone is continuing to make that sort of proposition after you declining several times, then they're probably not seeing you. They're seeing something else. Like how powerful that sort of conversation would have been, right? So when I'm in this situation, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, my daddy told me that you looking for something else. You're not really wanting me, so, and I'm not willing to share my body with someone who just wants that. Like, daddies, come on.
Mm-hmm. And I think, so one, let me ask you this. What happened when your father found out?
When he found out what?
That you were having sex in the 9th grade.
He did not find out that I was having sex in the 9th grade.
Oh, sir, I hope you're not watching this today, because you're going to find out.
He did not find out, right? All of that stuff was done in secrecy, which builds a whole nother thing. You looking for the spot to get busy and all of that and do. Now, what's interesting, and I'm gonna lay another bombshell.
Come
on,
I like bombshells, but I don't know where this is going, but I like it.
So in the 9th grade, no, he did not find out. But I had the same boyfriend all throughout high school. So we had a lot of sex during that.
Oh.
So in the 12th grade, I got pregnant. And it was a collective decision. We decided that I would have an abortion. So I had an abortion that was also done in secrecy. And it wasn't until, like, I thought I was home free. Like, I left school that day and and we had a friend that I rested at their house afterward and recovered. Woo. So there's, at least back then, there's, some medication that you take afterward to make sure you're good. Well, my mom happened to find that medication. I don't know how. She probably knew something. Her mama spider skills was probably.
Moms be knowing.
Right. So she found the medication, and that's how they found out that I had an abortion. And that's how they found out that I was having sex. Right. So my dad was disappointed. He was, which hurt because I was a daddy's girl. I was still a daddy's girl, So he was disappointed. He was shocked. Both my parents were, actually, because I was the good girl. I had like straight A's. I was on the honor roll. I was in leadership, all the clubs and stuff, and woo, right? And so I did all that good stuff, and I did some other stuff. And so anywho, we ended up having a conversation afterward. I was embarrassed, that he had found out, and that's how he found out. But then still, there really wasn't a whole lot of discussion around it. It was like, okay, this is done. Abortion is not a form of birth control. Don't do it no more.
Right.
And I didn't. So that's it.
Wow. So, I mean, this is a good, one lesson in a conversation for men out there who are growing up, right? Well, not really growing up, but for the men out there who have daughters. Really, this is important for you to have this type of conversation with your daughters early, right? Because in this day and age, what I'm realizing is there's a lot of, women, they're powerful women, they're making money, they're working long hours, they're doing a lot of different things. And sometimes the men could be working, but they may get home a little earlier or whatever the case is, or they could be single men raising kids at this point, right? So with that said, a lot of men might be more prone to getting that call. Oh, hey, Dad, Mom's at work. I need a pad or whatever the case. I need a pad, or I'm bleeding at school, whatever the case is. You might get that call, right? So you've got to know how to handle these things, right? you can't be afraid to go into the store and do what you got to do, right? Because that's always been a big thing. Man, I can't go in the store, go out there getting them pads, man. That's crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't do that, right? Like, you've got to be able to do these things for your daughter. But like you said, you hit puberty a year before you start your period, right? So, question for you, for the men out there, what or are there any questions that maybe guys can ask their daughters at a certain age to begin to understand signs, or to learn more about their daughters? Hey, are you feeling this? Or like, what are you feeling? Like, what is, because I know every woman is different, every girl is different, everybody's body's different, right? But like, what are some of the key signs that a men can say, be alerted to, right? Or questions that they can ask their girls to begin to learn or begin the process for that time when they start having their period?
Right, right. So I want to address something else before I address that. So
Of
make
course.
sure I get back to what you just asked.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you said was it's important for dads, parents, to
Mm,
start early in terms of what I call laying the foundation of body positivity. So
mm.
when we think about our kids when they're 1 and 2 years old, they know where their head is. They could point out their nose, their ears, right? But we don't teach them words like penis because we feel uncomfortable about it, right?
Mm.
We don't teach them vulva, which is the external genitalia of a woman. A lot of people think that vagina is vulva, but it's not. So like with my son, I taught him all his parts and the correct words. I didn't use words like wee wee and Peter and all of that kind of
Peter.
stuff. I used penis. That's what I
Yeah,
used. And
yeah.
I didn't put no funny energy on it. Just the same kind of energy around this is your toe, this is your penis, this is your eye, da 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 da, woo woo woo, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they don't know as kids. They start feeling our energy when we put funny energy on it. And so
Mm.
parents, we got to be really, and godfathers, we got to
Yes,
be
indeed.
really conscious of the energy and how we're talking, to our children. So I just want to lay that
Uh,
foundation first of body
I love
positivity.
that.
Start early,
Right.
especially when dads are in on the teaching. So first of all, ideally, before their daughter gets there,
Mm-hmm.
dads have already laid a foundation of body positivity. So that starts when they are toddlers, teaching them their nose, teaching them their
Mm-hmm.
eyes, their head, their
Yep.
penis, their vulva, not putting any funny energy on it, right? Because as adults, we sexualize it. So that's what makes it uncomfortable.
Mm.
A 2-year-old, no, they're just like, oh, this is something else on my body, just like my toe. So
Mm.
hopefully dads have laid that foundation of body positivity. So that's around there, like 2, right? And then they creeping up on age 5. And then they're creeping up on age 7. And ideally, that around 7, 8 is when it would be good for parents, dads included, to start having conversations, laying the foundation for period positivity.
Mm.
Like, this is what's coming. These are the changes that you will notice in your body. So, for example, girls, before they experience menarche, before they have their first period, a lot of times a year before that, they'll have a growth spurt, right?
Mm.
They'll have a really significant growth spurt. They're really, really tall. So that's a sign, right? Sometimes girls will experience, as their breasts begin to bud, it'll feel like tender in that area,
Mm-hmm.
tender
Mm-hmm.
to the touch. So
Yeah.
if they have a hug or something, or they lay a certain way, it'll be a new experience. Like, oh, I feel tender like that. So
Mm.
as their breasts begin to bud, certainly for girls, just like the boys, gotta wash them armpits. When you start smelling that little funk, it's like, wait a minute, something's changing.
Oh yeah, I remember those days. Oh, mom
Something's
was
changing.
smelling me,
So
boy.
it's about right. So it's about parents being observant,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what the signs are, and being ahead of the game, right? So we don't, as we talked about before, a lot of times dads are shocked when their daughters start their period. And we don't want dads to be behind the 8 ball, because it will it's highly probable, as you said, that dads will be the one at home with the daughters when she starts her period, or, she'll be at school, or whatever your parenting, situation is, you may get the call. So dads, you want to be ready. You want to bring your A game to your daughter. I feel I have so many dads that say to me, or I'll see it on Facebook, dads posting the pictures with their daughters. It's all cute and everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do anything for my daughter. Really? Okay, dad, then you need to educate yourself on puberty, on the female anatomy. You need to chuck your own, shame around it, insecurities around it, taboo around it, lean into the conversation. You need to understand the menstrual cycle. You need to understand all 4 phases. You need to understand how to help your daughter take care of herself during every phase. And you need to understand how she can use that as a guide to her self-care. And you also need to value your fatherhood enough to prepare her for what's coming in the world, dads. We need you to do that.
Right. And not just prepare them for what we're comfortable with.
Exactly.
Right. And, because we're comfortable with having certain conversations about, listen, you better not have no boys at this house, boys of this, boys of that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't go here, you can't go there. Like, it's dangerous out there in these streets. This, like we're, because that's the machismo. That's the essence of like fatherhood. Like, I gotta protect my daughters and make sure that nothing bad is gonna happen to them. Right. And that's needed too. I'm not saying that that's definitely needed, but this is a part of it as well. And I know a lot of us are uncomfortable. I know 2000%. It's like, go to, yeah, I think your mother might know a little bit more about those kind of things. You might want to head upstairs and have that conversation. Yeah. And whenever you need some protection, I got you, I got this, but maybe mom can get that. And you go upstairs and do that. And then, but like you said, that could leave a thing where it's like, well, why doesn't daddy want to know? Or why doesn't daddy want to learn? Or why doesn't daddy want to have those conversations with me? Something wrong with me? What's going on? Right. So then that leaves the daughter feeling a little unprotected. Right.
Yes.
So how about this? So what do you say because this is a hot topic out in the social media world, these gender roles, right? So what would you say if people are like, well, that's really should be a mother's job. It's a father's job to do this. It should be a mother's job to do that, right? What do you say to that? Because that is a hot topic out here about what a woman should do and what a man should do. And neither of those paths should cross. Right. Like, it should just be like this and that's it. Right. And historically, these conversations surrounding periods and things that it's been done by the mother. Right. So what do you say to that?
Yeah. So I disagree on this particular topic.
Oh, I know. I figured you would. I want the answer.
Disagree. And for a couple reasons. So one, historically, yes, moms have been the educators around menstruation and periods, but not in a positive aspect, at least not in the US. So I'm conducting what's called a Period Stories Project, where I'm interviewing men, women, boys, girls, a variety of ages, backgrounds, all that stuff, because we all have a period story. And the grown women who 30, 40 years old, that I have been interviewing are many of them, not all, but many of them are saying that they knew nothing before their period started. Like, there was no education at all. Nobody talked to them. So when they started their period, they go to pee, they go to the bathroom and they see blood in the crotch of their panties. They're freaked out, like literally think that they're dying. Right?
Yeah.
Like literally, because they had no education. And so that's because the negative stigma about it is so deep, it's so thick, that women are continuing to communicate right? We talk about the term generational traumas, where
Yeah.
women are passing down the trauma to their daughters, unfortunately, right? So
Wow.
if a daughter gets any education, like she might get it from school, the sex ed class, right? Or the
Mm-hmm.
health education, whatever they call it
Mm-hmm.
now. She might
Mm-hmm.
get a little something from that. But for a lot of girls, if she's getting any education, the education is here's a pad, here's a tampon, go forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the education. So we're doing our daughters, in my opinion, and
Mm-hmm.
this is not to blame anybody. Like we're
Right, of
not putting
course.
blame nowhere here, but it's my opinion that we're doing our daughters a disservice. First of all, by not starting the conversation early and laying those seeds, like we already talked about, those seeds of body positivity,
Mm-hmm.
but couching it in a way that, like, hey, this is something to be celebrated. You have the power to manifest. And I just don't just mean, having a child, like, woo, yeah, that is powerful, to
Right,
be
right,
able to
right.
do that, God given us, that power,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to do that, but also to, manifest ideas and create, like, creation in the biggest sense, right?
Right,
And
right.
so when it's couched that way, it's experienced differently. It's
Mm.
experienced more positively. So that's one of the reasons that I believe dads should be a part of this, because
Mm-hmm.
even the grown women are not giving positive education, if any. So
Mm.
the other reason that it's important for dads to lean in, and as we're talking about gender roles and all this kind of stuff, is
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of times when dads say, "Go talk to your mama," da 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 da, it's because they haven't yet understood their value as a father in this critical point of their daughter's development.
Mm.
So
That's powerful.
what I'm challenging dads to do is to understand your value as a father. Dads, when you lean into this, you will positively impact your baby's self-esteem. You don't want
Mm.
her out there making decisions to keep a boyfriend just because. Like, you don't want her, making those types of decisions. So
Mm.
that's why this is not a gender role thing to me. This is a parent thing. And also, dads, when you're leaning into these so-called taboo conversations, and being vulnerable, because yes, you're gonna feel uncomfortable. Yes, so what? Feel it and do it anyway.
Mm.
Because what you're going to do is you're going to model for your daughter the importance of having these courageous conversations. And I call them courageous connecting conversations. So when she's, out and about, out in the world, deciding who she wants to have a romantic relationship with, she's going to be using that as a foundation for how she discerns who she
Mm.
chooses to engage with. Can this
Mm.
person have these conversations with me? Can we go there in a way that's respectful and uplifting? So
Mm.
that's why it's important, Brother Terrence.
I love that. And it is a foundation because it's very important to know, especially as you get older, like when you start, dating and things like that. If you're going through some things, because every woman's body is very different. Some people have more painful periods than others and more heavier flows than others and things like that. So you might be dating somebody and you might be one of those people who are experiencing it heavy, or, you have things that's painful, right? Cramps and this and that and third. And now the guy you're dating, maybe he dated somebody else that didn't have that, who had it, like, light and whatever the case is, and didn't go through certain things. And now he's looking at you like, well, what's wrong with you? You need to go to the doctor, and then you ask him like, hey, can you go get these things from the store? And he's looking at you like, me? I can try to Amazon it to you. Like, it might take 2 days to get there. But, or it's like, hey, I'll order it for you. And then, you can just go to Target and go pick it up yourself. Right. um, and these are things that makes women feel unseen and unheard, in relationships. Right. Because to them it's very simple. It's like, well, like, you're going around having sex with me and this and that and there, and now you can't even go get, a simple pad or tampon. And so the discernment, around that is real, because as a woman, if your father was able to talk to you about these things, and then you get a guy who can't, you're gonna be like, wait, so my daddy can talk to me about this stuff, but you can't. Man, get up out of here, man. You know what I mean? Like this not gonna work. It's not gonna work, because now your dad presents a different type of a father figure and a man, right? It's like, because now you're gonna want that modeled for your daughter if you have one, right? So I can see what you mean by that, because this is in a very, very much so an important conversation for men to have, and also a good conversation for your father to men for you to teach your boys. Also, about women, about young teenagers, about their struggles, about what they go through, why you shouldn't be maybe pressuring them, right? Because they're going through different things in their bodies and whatever the case is, and teaching them to have compassion and empathy at an early age so that they can be educated. So when they go out into the world and when they date, they have the same compassion and empathy as you taught them to have. Right. So that's very much so very, 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 very important. So you have one thing that we didn't talk about is something called rock your menstrual rhythm. I love these. I love these titles, man. What is that program about?
Yes. So initially, I started working with girls, as I mentioned before. I wanted to, because I knew that they weren't getting positive education if they were getting any education. So that was my initial, sort of leap into this area. And so that's the Power to the Period workshop. It's a 4-hour workshop where for the first 2.5 hours or so, it's just me and the girls. And so the moms or the female caregiver, could be auntie, grandmother, whatever, they join us at the end. And I create a beautiful sort of mother-daughter connection, sort of like a little mini rite of passage, ceremony at the end. It's fantastic. It's amazing. Like words can't express
I love that.
the bonding that occurs.
Right.
So what I learned from witnessing that is that grown women have so many traumas or residue about their own cycles that they're still carrying. And I was like, oh, shoot, wait a minute. my grown sisters need some support too. So that's where the Rock with Your Menstrual Rhythm workshop, that's how it was born, right? Wow. That was the intention behind that, to first of all teach grown women about what not just me, but what's called the red thread. And the red thread represents how her mother line, meaning her mother, their mother, mother, how they experienced each initiation. So like when you start your period, that's an initiation. When you get married, that's an initiation. If you become a mother, that's initiation. How they experience that, whether they know the stories or not, impacts how they themselves were experiencing it. So for those, the people like I talked about who were interviewing, who didn't get any education or got negative education, because the shame is often built into the education that they're getting. Like, and moms are saying, you can get pregnant now, keep your legs closed, and that's it. So grown women were carrying so much residue around that. So teach them about the red thread, teach them about all 4 phases of the cycle, how to sync up their lifestyle with their cycle, because there are some people who consider the menstrual cycle to be like one of the vital signs for women. You take your blood pressure, heart rate, check the menstrual cycle. How is it, how's it going? It can be an indicator of some other things. And so when women learn how to set healthy boundaries, how to deal with that so-called PMS stage, phase of the cycle, how to deal with it positively, then they have a much more positive experience of their own cycle. And I encourage them to talk with their partners about it. Because let me tell you that when a man understands the menstrual cycle, when he understands her phases, when he understands the pattern and can stay a step ahead, when
Mm-hmm.
she's in the phases where she's maybe not feeling good, right? And the man who's been paying attention knows that, she would like to have her feet rubbed, or knows that she would like to have her back rubbed, or knows that she needs the hot water bottle to put over, her uterus for that comfort, or knows whatever oils that she needs. When he initiates that stuff, man,
Knows what
let me
she's
just say,
craving.
exactly. Exactly. You are like in like Flynn. She's going to appreciate you so much for
Yeah.
paying attention to her.
Yeah. It's a different level of intimacy, a different type of intimacy. And and it just shows that you're in it. Like you're not just in it for the regular intimacy or whatever the case is. You're actually in tune with her. You're in tune with her body, and you're in tune with her needs. Right. And I think that is something that's very important, especially in relationships and things like that. So correct me if I'm wrong. So kind of wanted to ask you this about period tracking. So with all of the new laws that has popped up, right, about, abortions and this, that, and the third, different states have different, have prohibited, even different surgeries that women would need, that's a whole other conversation. But they were talking about period tracking on your phone and certain things like that. Like you shouldn't do any period tracking on your phone anymore, because now if you do that, the government, if you're trying to get certain procedures or whatever the case is, it could be held against you. Just a lot of just different things like that, right? Like, so when it comes to period tracking, would you advise, using apps, or would you just say track it manually on your get an Excel or Google Sheet and just crunch in those numbers? What are your kind of suggestions on period tracking?
Yes, this is a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. So first of all, period tracking is important.
Yeah.
So that's how a girl, woman, a person who menstruates, that's how they understand what their normal is. Because
Yeah.
like you said, everybody's different. Some
Mm-hmm.
people's cycles is the standard 28 days. That's the average. Some people less than that, some people longer than that. So every person who menstruates needs to understand what their normal is. And not only in terms of, amount of flow and, tracking the days and all that, but also in terms of like your energy levels, your appetite, your sleeping, your bowel movements, like all of that is important, like really getting in and,
Mm-hmm.
logging and tracking all of that stuff, your emotions, if there are things coming up that are triggering you or whatever. So I really encourage comprehensive tracking. And yes, there have been some concerns about the privacy or confidentiality of the tracking apps.
Mm-hmm.
So you can still use the app. There's some, good ones out there, and you may want to gauge it depending on what state you live in.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some
Some people.
beautiful, there's this beautiful book, and I'm not an affiliate or anything like that, but it's called the Cycle Tracking Journal.
Mm-hmm.
It's magnificent. The book is red, but it's
Yeah.
just a beautiful book, and it guides people through tracking all that stuff and more that I just described. And it's almost like, because this is spiritual, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
people to know that understanding the menstrual cycle is a spiritual process. When romantic partners connect, and the boyfriend or husband is able to know her patterns and all that, like that's, like you said, that's a deeper connection. This is like a spiritual connection. And so you can use something like the Cycle Tracking Journal, which I have one, and it's actually, it helps you to reflect on who you are and what's going on in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
reflecting is a wonderful part of what I teach about taking care of yourself during the different phases of the menstrual cycle. So yes, track. That
Yeah.
is absolutely important. And for those people who menstruate, of course, it's important to track, to know your patterns and to share it with your romantic partner. that's a part of that spiritual connection. It's a part of that deeper connection, so that your partner will understand what you're going through, will understand your experiences. Unfortunately, girls and women are taught to keep their periods a secret, to not talk about it. And that perpetuates the stigma. That leaves people who don't menstruate in the dark, like clueless. Like, I don't know what the heck is going on, other than I just need to get ghost for 5 days because I don't know what's happening, right? So that's not a way to connect. Like, that's not a way to bond. So this is tracking and knowing your patterns, sharing your patterns with your partner is just a beautiful way to deepen your connection.
I love that. So let's talk to the young girls out there, your teens, in your community, right? So what would you say to a young teenager who's feeling shame, who's not really understanding what's going on with their body at this point? And they might be listening to the podcast right now, and saying like, oh man, like I'm learning so much from Dr. Carmen, right? And which we all are. And so, but what would you tell her, right, who's feeling confused, shamed, about what she's feeling in her body right now?
Right. So first of all, I would tell her that there's a lot of education that she hasn't received yet, right? And it's nobody's fault, not placing blame. Unfortunately, it's a societal issue.
Yes.
So I would say, bless your heart, beloved. I understand why you would be feeling this way about your body in this social context. So there's a lot of education that you haven't received yet. And if you're open to, receiving the positive education, the way that you can, learning about the way that you can feel good about your body, that you can understand your body, that you can use it as a guide to help you take care of yourself and feel great about yourself, then I'm here for you. And I have yet to have a teen say no, that they're not open, to learning that, because they want to feel better and they want to know. Let me just share with you. So I have workshops, but then I also work one-on-one, just depending on people's schedules and all that. So I had a mother who came to me whose daughter is 8 in the 3rd grade, 8 years old, and asking questions. I'm gonna just call her Jaya, right? So Jay has been asking her mama questions like, what is a period? When will I wear a bra? What are those things for that you're putting in your underwear? Talking about pads, right? So she's curious. She's asking questions. So I started working one-on-one. I divided into 4 sessions. And so during the first session, I'm getting to know Jaya, and she shares with me that she is the founding member of the GPC at her elementary school. What's the GPC? The Girls Period Club. In the 3rd grade. She and 5 of her friends have come together. They come together at recess to try to educate each other on periods, because they are curious. They want to know about their bodies. They want to get ready. They want to be prepared. These girls are 8 in the 3rd grade, trying to educate each other. They don't know what they're talking about. So first of all, bless their hearts, right? Like, great for them for wanting to support each other. And she was like, yes, we have 6 people, but we want to get to 10, because they want to, educate each other and have more people in the GPC. But we got to have positive education for them. So, yeah.
She might be like at some point, she might be a little you. Some point.
Right. Because I got to train some folks that can take over after me.
Yeah, for the next generation. That's so amazing. Now, on the flip side to that, and I don't think a lot of boys would ask about this, right? But what would you tell just young men out there, right, about education about this topic? Right, because young men are young men. We are, young men at a certain age are just very much so have a lot of testosterone. Right, it's crazy. And you start liking, these little crushes and things like that, and even yourself, like you may not know what to do with your own urges and whatever. So you're like how you went through in school and things like that, and boys and right. So what would you tell young men about a young woman's process and the things that she's going through? All right. And how can he be of help, if any, to even his friends? Talking about the young kids and romantic things, but like even just as a friend, because I think that's important too, right? Just as a friend, how can you support your other friend, right? Who may be going through something and may not know why, or may be ashamed to talk about it, like you say, right? So what would you tell, these young men out there who may be in high school or junior high or whatever the case is, and are encountering these things for the first time?
Right. I love this question. And I have a son who's 16.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And we talk about these things regularly. Um, it's just a part of how we get down in our household.
I love
And
it.
it's not like I sit him down and say, we're about to have the talk, like that never goes over well,
That's uncomfortable. Thanks, Mom. Thank you. Can I leave now?
So, right. So we weave it into other stuff. So like if there's something on TV that we see or something on social media, like we bring, like everything is a teachable moment. Have a conversation, feel them out, see how they're doing with it. You can continue or stop, but it's not one conversation that you're having. It's a series of conversations that you're having. So first of all, that's just kind of how we get down. When my son is in the car, he can't get away. That's when we have a lot of those conversations.
You can't jump out the car, baby. Yeah, that's a good strategy right there.
And yes, it's still in this day and age, it's still uncomfortable, to talk about. But because we've laid the foundation in our household for talking about these things that are so-called taboo and uncomfortable, he's now in the space where he's not squirming in his seat anymore. At least now he's sitting still.
Right. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, it's just Mom.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and also as a part of our household, we can communicate and have laid down some other things as a part of my son's masculinity and his maleness and his just humanness, that he be a person of compassion and he be a person of integrity and really understanding, what other people are going through and trying to, walk in their shoes. The dojo that we chose, which was one that was really about character development. So as a part of that, he knows that, he defends people who are defenseless, or he at least speaks up or can remove them from the situation. So all that stuff we laid for him. So we use that to couch how important it is as a male to understand the menstrual cycle, to understand what a girl is going through, with her body, to understand that girls may bleed through their clothes, right? And they may have the spot on the back of their dress or the back of their pants. And there's a lot of teasing out there about that. There's a lot of shaming about that. So we are like drilling into my son that, one, he's not participating in that shaming. And two, he's going to stand up against it. And three, he's going to walk her to the nurse's office. Right? Like that's what he about to do.
I love that.
And if I hear that he did not do that, man, it's on. And he don't want none of me.
We never do. We never want none of Mom and Dad. I tell you that's just what it is. But that's great. But in his self-defense, it's self-defense, right? It's karate. It's in his dojo, right?
He did Taekwondo. Yeah.
Taekwondo. It's amazing, by the way. And so you're using that actually as a good gateway to channel and to instill other things, other aspects. Okay, hey, this is good. You know how to fight. But there's other aspects to protection. There's other aspects to speaking up about different injustices that your friends might encounter, right? Or if you have a girlfriend at 16, then that they have, right? And so that's super important. And I love that you said that he needs to protect them. He needs to walk them to the nurse's office. He needs to stand up for them especially verbally, if somebody is verbally making fun of them or trying to shame them and things like that. That is very good lesson for the young boys out there, who could be watching this. You need to educate yourself, and you need to be able to stand up for your friends, right? If they're really your friends, right? You really need to stand up for your friends. And even if you don't know them, if you see something, right, that's just out of pocket, and you've learned, hey, look, that red spot, right? Or on their clothes or whatever the case is, or, if they're being made fun of because of these things, you got to say something. Because these are just normal, natural things that happen to women and young girls out here. They're normal. They're ashamed too. That's embarrassing to them, right? It's embarrassing to adults if it happens to adults. So I know it's embarrassing to young girls if it happens to young girls, right? And these are traumatic experiences. But just you standing up for them and shift that narrative and shift that perspective on them, right? And that is something that we need in just community. So I'm really glad that you mentioned this, and you brought that out, because it's so important that we do teach our young boys about these things.
Yeah. The other thing that I would add to that, as a part of our culture and educating him, we've let him know that when the situation occurs that he would need to stand up for this particular matter, he's likely to experience some backlash from his boys, from his homies, right? So we want to prepare him for that too. Like, don't be surprised, if they say you weak or you whatever, you crazy, you whatever, da girl, that's a girl, she bleeding, whatever. Don't be surprised if that comes. So that's part of the preparation as well, that you may be the lone wolf standing up. You may be the only person standing up, but do it anyway. Stand in it anyway. That's what leadership is about.
It's so true. Because sometimes leadership is not easy, and you got to take a stand for something, even if it's not popular. And I know teasing, I know all about it. Teasing is unfortunately, is a part of adolescence and young teenagers, and even young girls, they tease each other. It's not just a boy thing. These girls are ruthless out here in these streets. And because it may happen to another girl, and maybe the other girl knows all about certain things or whatever the case is, and it doesn't happen to her, and then you find a girl who it does happen to. It could even just be on accident. Now these girls are just and that's a shame. And that breeds more shame, right? And then you come home and you don't want to talk about it because you're embarrassed, right? And these are the conversations that we really need to be having across the community, across households, because it's very important, the work that you're doing. So I applaud you, one, for the work that you're doing. It's very necessary and needed across all platforms, and I'm very happy that I've been able to have this conversation with you thus far, because it's super important as people grow up, as we grow up. And so we talked about the young boys and the young girls, but now there's a lot of adults, a lot of women, that, like you said, have lack of education, have shame around it. Even at the ages of 30 and 40, which might surprise some people, right? But now it's the inner little girl in them that's coming out, that's speaking to them, right? The shame and this and that, right? So what would you tell a woman now who's 30, 35, 40, right? Who still might have some shame, and who may have a daughter right now, right? Who wants to shy away from the conversation because maybe they don't have the tools, right? What would you say to them about how to proceed, right? Like how would you, what would you tell that little inner girl that's within them?
Right. It's funny because last weekend I was just speaking at the Black Maternal and Feminine Health Symposium
Love it.
in California. And so in my workshop, that's who was sitting in front of me pretty much was the 30 and 40-year-olds,
Mhm.
some adolescents in there, and then some older women. But what I shared with them is that we have been misinformed, underinformed, miseducated, misled, right?
Mm.
Right, because that's the real of
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
When we're taught to be ashamed of this, that's miseducation. That's being misled. When we're taught to devalue ourselves because we experienced this process, that's miseducation. It's even oppression.
Wow.
So when we have the experience of being undereducated, miseducated, no education, lack of education, it makes it hard to critically evaluate what's going on.
Mm.
So we think that the negative stigma is just the norm,
Mm.
right? We think
Hmm.
that's just how it is, how life is. Periods are nasty. It's a curse. It's an inconvenience. I could,
Hmm.
boom, right? And so we haven't critically evaluated the bigger picture and what's going on. And so when I start with, you've been misled, you've been miseducated, you've been undereducated, they're like, what?
Hmm.
What you talking about? And so then I start with, how this is spiritual work and understanding how you were taught,
Mm.
understanding how your mama was taught, possible, how her mama was taught, if it's possible to, get that information now, and helping them think critically about how it's discussed and why. Like there are lots of folks who are in this, there aren't a lot of us, but the folks who do this type of work,
Hmm.
talk about how patriarchy is like the fool in terms of communicating this miseducation,
Mm.
undereducation, right? Being misled. And so it helps people when I lead with that, it at least gets their attention because initially they're coming into it with like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to be celebrating this with my daughter. That's gross. Right. And that's what they're saying. And I'm like, hold up, sis, pay attention to this. And then I have their attention and they're like, oh, like mind blown, aha moment,
See what you're doing there. Yeah.
So that is usually how I address it. And everyone's not going to agree. Like I'm not going to convert everybody.
No.
I recognize that. But for the ones who are at least willing to take a look, they have those aha moments and they're like, oh, because it was taught to me this way. This is the type of society that I grew up in. That impacts how I experienced it. Oh, well, I want something different for my daughter. So what can I teach her that's different? Right. So that's what we do.
Wow. It's amazing. I love that. And now, last but not least, the men. Um, we are very interesting. But we are the ones who shy away a lot from these conversations. You know, and a lot of it could just be, the ignorance of just being missing, you're just not informed at all. Um, not taking the time out to learn, right? Because what I in my mind, and this is just the way my mind works, sometimes I feel like if you can learn these things about women in this way, about the menstrual and what they go through, and you develop that compassion, that empathy, right? Now, when it comes to other things in life, now I feel like you could be open to that, learning more so about pregnancy, postpartum depression, what happens, after they have a baby, right? And having an understanding of that person, right, and not just about how you feel and your needs and the things that go on after pregnancy, right? Why is she acting this way, right? Catching on to certain things. Okay, why is she doesn't seem like she's depressed? Why doesn't she feel like she wants to touch on me now? Why doesn't she feel like she wants to do certain things in life, right? Like, and you get offended. Now you're mad. right? And because you have a lack of understanding about their body, their mental health, how much it takes to have a baby, right? And what happens after that, right? So now you're at divorce court, right? Or now you want to break up, or now you want to just whatever it is, right? In response, or now you're like, you know what? Then I'll treat her like she treats me, and then now we're going tit for tat, right? These things happen because miscommunication. Sometimes the women may not even know how to communicate what they're going through, but they're going through, and you don't know how severe postpartum depression can be. It can be very bad. So I say all that to say, if you can start by learning things like this, right, it can open up your mind to have an understanding about other things that women go through and have that compassion and empathy for the things that they go through in life as well, and just getting that kind of an education. And I think that if you really do your research and take the time, you'll understand a lot, and you'll be glad that you're not the one going through it. That's number one. And the empathy and compassion will be there, and you can find ways to open up those lines of communication to be a help, and you won't take things so personal, right? Now, everybody has to do their part. I'm not saying be a doormat. I'm not saying any of those things. What I'm saying, though, is to get the education, to want to learn more so that you can have more in your tool belt, to be an assistant, to be a help, to take the load off of your person, right? As they go through these things, because that's what happens. You got postpartum, but then you got to talk about raise your kids. Then you got to tend to your husband. Then you got to take care of the house. Then you got to your husband's like, I want some attention too. Like, I ain't trying to. I'm going through stuff, right? So I say all that rambling to say, when it comes to men, if you could talk to them, you're able to talk to the women in your classes, and then you have this amazing workshop for dads. But if you can talk to even somebody like myself who doesn't have kids, who's thinking about having kids, or whatever the case is, right? What would you tell them about how to begin even just getting an education? I would say go to Dr. Carmen, listen to some of her videos or some of her workshops. But what tools can they grasp at to say, hey, I want to know more about, it's good to have kids, it's good to want to have kids, right? But there's things, right? Tools in the tool belt. What tools can they get, right? To say, hey, I want to know more about the periods, the menstrual cycle, the mental health behind that. Everything you talked about, the shame, like what are some of the things that men can do, young men can do to really get more tools in their tool belt so they could be prepared for that journey?
Right. So I think the most important thing is learning in a supportive, non-judgmental, safe environment. So sometimes men feel uncomfortable because they don't know, right?
Yes.
They feel uncomfortable because they don't know. And so they feel uncomfortable because they're scared to say the wrong thing or ask the wrong question or, whatever it is. So what I do is create a very safe, like I said, non-judgmental, safe, environment for the learning to occur, to get the skill, because there's some skill involved with this, in addition to tools and skills, two different things. You need both.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens in the Dads Puberty Playbook Masterclass, and also, which is free, by the way, online, virtual. And then in my coaching program where we go really deeper. But you need a safe environment, because you can read stuff online. Like you could Google what's the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. You could get the textbook definitions, but there's nothing like being in a community of men, being in a community of dads, sharing and connecting, sharing like, oh man, when I did right? That's where a lot of that learning occurs. So sure, I would encourage, men to do some Googling. You could do some preliminary stuff, but I have, and I'm not trying to boast, but I have seen nothing as comprehensive as what I offer, particularly to dads and dads to be, if they would like to get to be ahead of the 8 ball. Yeah. I have seen nothing out there that's comprehensive. So there are some small little classes where dads can just sort of learn what happens for girls in puberty and but there's not how to lean into using your special dad mojo to connect with your daughter. Like you can understand the physical anatomy stuff, like that's cool. Right. But there's a social aspect to this as well that you can't get learning by yourself. Like you can't get, because it's social. Social means there's some other people involved, with the learning. So yes, I would say, you can do some Googling, and I would say, reach out to someone like me who is down to earth, who recognizes the value of dads and men in terms of girls and women having a healthy self-esteem. Like it just goes together. Right. So if you want to engage with someone who is down to earth, can speak the technical stuff and the hood street stuff, absolutely, and weave it all together beautifully, then let's do it together. And I also want to say, for any man, that purchasing the period care products is not a threat to your masculinity. Say
that again. Say it again.
Right. Purchasing the period care products, fellas, will not jeopardize your manhood. We won't take away your man card. If anything, we're going to add some notches to it. Like, hey, thank you. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
No, I think you should, because the reason why I asked that question about men is because before I feel like men can even get to you, like even somebody like myself, like doing the research on a lot of just different things when it comes to women. So I have an understanding of things with them, so I can provide that compassion and empathy. Right. I think just even starting to even begin to do research it's a big step to even type these words into your browsing history, like into your browser. Right. Like it's like a thing you'd be shaking. All right, well, Iris, what am I supposed to type here? I got to do, like, you got to type this stuff into to even want to learn. And with men, sometimes you got to take a step. And that is one big step for mankind when it comes to even just typing these things into these words into your browser and hitting enter and going to YouTube University and Google and looking at these things. Right. And so it's like, before I can even get to Dr. Carmen, I got to do a little bit of research on my own. But I promise you, if you do some research, I promise you'll have a better understanding of at least some things of what women go through. You'll read testimonials, like you'll get a basic education. And even while you're in a relationship, it'll help your relationship just to even have that type of understanding. And then, let's just say, right, I want to become a dad. You call Dr. Carmen, contact her out. You start getting now you're getting a deeper level of education. But start somewhere, fellas. Even if it's just a Google search, some books, YouTube University, whatever it is. Start somewhere, because that's also a way of how we start to heal our homes, and we start to be able to communicate better with our own spouses, right? Because a lot of times it's miscommunication or lack of communication, no communication, mum's the word, right? And then everybody's harvesting animosity towards the other person. Well, he doesn't understand what I'm going through. He's not compassionate. She don't understand what's her problem. Maybe she don't like me no more. Now it's just now we're not communicating this and that there until we just hit a crash and burn, right? And I think that if we can have more of these types of conversations like me and you are having right now, and it's no shame involved, it's unfiltered, it's honest, it's open. We start having more of these conversations in our own communities. I think that could be where it starts, to having these types of conversations of the heart. And you know, but I love the work you're doing. It's so important. It's so informative. I've learned a lot from you today. And I appreciate the work that you do. I implore women, young girls, young boys, men to really look into the work that you're doing. Go on your website, go on your YouTube. Just take a look at everything that Dr. Carmen has to offer. I think she's amazing, amazing, brilliant at what she does. So before we get out of here, tell the people where they can find you, how they can contact you, how they can book you for your workshops, speaking of events, see your past speaking events, your YouTube, your social media. Just let them know.
Yes. So there's a freebie that I want to mention on my website. So if you go to periodofempowerment.com, no dots, nothing in there other than the .com, but period of empowerment, all one word together, there's a freebie tab. And that freebie is about how to make periods positive. It's a really short, little, quick read, take you 5 minutes. So that is a great place to start. For those men out there who are really interested in supporting their daughters, I would love for you to join our Facebook group. So we have a Facebook group that's for parents. There's men and women in it. And it's all about empowering our teen daughters. And so I really, really emphasize that because of the community, right? So if you do nothing but go to Google and, read some stuff and then join, our become a part of the Facebook group and talk about what you're learning. Ask questions about what you learned, when you did your Google. The support is there because that's the thing. A lot of times men will feel like they're doing this in isolation. Like, they're doing it by themselves, and they are. Right. But the real deeper learning comes from community. So join us. The quick little shortened link is bit.ly/empower teen daughters. So bit.ly/empower teen daughters. That'll get you into our Facebook group so you can learn how to continue your own learning, your own journey in terms of supporting your daughter. So those are like the two key ways. Yes, I'm on Instagram at Period of Empowerment, but I'm cool with Instagram, but it doesn't give the real connection and learning that I really feel needs to occur. So I post a few little things on there. You get a little bit of learning on there. But the connection is what's really important and what I'm really wanting to emphasize. And I just want to say that the community piece is so key. Coming together, having conversations, is just so key. So those are a couple of the places where you can find me.
And you have a YouTube too, right?
I do. Period of Empowerment with Dr. Carmen. Again, it's only like 4 videos on there. However, all of them pack a powerful punch in terms of the basic education. So what I have done is broken down some larger discussion videos into bite-sized chunks, which is really nice too. So if you want to learn the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, there's a quick little short video on that. If you want to learn what happens in puberty for girls, there's a short little video on that. So you don't have to sit through an hour-long conversation. You can really chunk it down into bite-sized pieces, which I think is really good because then you can kind of digest. Like, okay, Dr. Carmen taught me this. Let me think about this. Let me marinate on this a little bit, and then I can come back for some more. So, yeah, check it out.
I love that, and I'm going to make it very easy for you guys. Everything is going to be right at the bottom. Everything, all the links are going to be right here. It's going to be right here. So you're not going to have to do anything but click and go. I'll make it super easy for everybody. So everything is going to be right here. click the link. It's going to be right here in the bottom, right in the bios and about the podcast. Everything is going to be right here in this episode for you to go ahead, click on it. So there's no excuse. You're not going to have to put nothing in the browser. It's going to be right there for the one click. So please go ahead and click and check everything out about Dr. Carmen. She's absolutely amazing. And where can people go to book you for workshops and speaking events?
Oh, absolutely. So, couple places. So, one on my website, there's a contact me. So if you fill that out with your information, let me know what it is that you're interested in. You can get that, and that will connect to me. But also, what I love to do more than anything is I love to talk with people. So you can book a free clarity call with, well, I call it a clarity call, getting clear on how you're going to learn about this period stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you can book a free 30-minute clarity call with me. That's bit.ly/Dr. Carmen session. So bit.ly/DrCarmen session, SESSION.
Mm-hmm.
And you can book a free 30-minute, again, no obligation. Just keep your appointment. Don't be trying to cancel on me.
Time is money. Don't play.
Right. And let's do it. Let's talk about, your next steps and how you're going to, and this is for anybody. This is for men, women, this is everybody. If you want to know how to, book me for speaking engagements or anything like that, you want me to facilitate a workshop. And by the way, I will say that I have had so much success in getting this word out by what I call organic grassroots stuff. So one person finds out what I do, like maybe a mom, and she's like, oh, I want this for my daughter. So she'll pull together, her daughter's friends, and we'll do it either face to face, or virtually. So dads, if you're out there, you're like, yeah, I got some brothers who will want to learn about this stuff, then, hey,
Yeah.
pull them together. Let's do it, or men, you're wanting to, know how to connect with your partner who menstruates, pull them together. Let's do it. We can do this.
I love it. I love everything about this. And again, Dr. Carmen, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Absolutely would love to have you on again at some point, and maybe do some work down the road together. But definitely appreciate this. It's been a great conversation. Like I said, I've learned. I know the audience has learned and have been blessed by this conversation. So again, thank you for coming on and doing this conversation. I really appreciate it. And this has been another episode of Conversations of the Heart. Again, it is your boy T. Till. Thank you so much for tuning in. Share, tell a friend, and tell a friend. And we will see you next week. Peace.